In the lower left-hand corner of your screen, you can see a chat box with a little blue rectangular button that says send. You can type in that long, the long box to the left of that send button, as I am doing now. And then you click on send. Oh, hello. Hello, Steve Arnold. And everybody will be able to see the chat. So that's one way to communicate, two ways. You can ask questions, just even have a little dialogue during the presentation with the chat box, and everybody will be able to see it. The other way to ask questions is the Q&A mode is functioning. So you should have a little ask a question button, and you click on that ask a question button, and I will be notified that there's somebody in the queue wishing to ask a question. And when I call on you, so to speak, it will enable your video, your audio. So everyone will be able to hear your question. I will respond once our question and answer period is over. Then I will close out your audio and get the next person in line if there's any questions. Also, throughout the course of the webinar, there are going to be some participatory polls and questions asked to get your feedback, to provide you opportunity to put in some ideas, put in your 2 cents, and that will automatically pop up on your screen, and you can just vote when you see it, and I'll let you know how the results are. And then finally, we will have several videos to watch tonight, and in addition to your computer volume, there's also a volume on the video player. So the volume should be pretty good, but if you need to adjust, feel free to do that. I can only control the overall volume. So that's the housekeeping, and away we go. So this has been a topic that has been emerging more and more of late, and I think part of it is because of the direction the Republican presidential nomination process is going. With the dominance of Donald Trump, we have the situation where more and more people are being drawn into this conversation about government and the fact that Trump is an outsider. He's has no experience in the government. He has no ties to the government beyond whatever tax breaks he gets from the government. But this idea of how government is framed, and the more and more I talk to people and work with them, the more I'm finding out that this is actually a critical problem that cuts across a lot of issues. So this is a very quick refresher. Most of you probably know this already, but good to refresh. So we have 2 frames, the progressive and conservative. So that gives us 2 views of government. Because we think of government in terms of a family, the metaphorical family of our nation. So those 2 models provide very different views of government and, in fact, democracy. So on the progressive side, you have some key ideas. First and foremost is this idea that private enterprise and prosperity is not possible without the public. And we have all sorts of examples of that. You can think of them right off the top of your head. Infrastructure like roads and gas lines and sewers and things like that. Everything from healthcare support to unemployment and Social Security and all the things that we do for them. Second of all is this core value of empathy, which in this case means that we have responsibility not only for ourselves but for others as well. And this is somewhat the core of the progressive view of government. And then finally, the idea that government has a moral role to play, and that is to protect and empower people. And you can see how this cuts across every issue. Then on the conservative side, a very different view of government. primarily that the public is immoral. And why is the public immoral? A few reasons. First of all, it takes away incentives for success. That's number one. It impedes discipline. So for example, if you have a social safety net, such as unemployment or Social Security, then people can't experience the pain, which is the punishment for not being disciplined. And that leads to the next point, which is that government impedes the disciplinary process itself. And finally, the idea that government impedes personal liberty. And in most cases, as you'll see, conservatives think of personal liberty as the freedom to gain profit, to gain some type of financial profit or gain. So very different views of government. So for a little bit of historical context, because this is not a recent phenomenon, and in fact, the Nobel laureate economist Milton Friedman started really raising a lot of these ideas in the context of economics and socioeconomics. And the first video is the beginning of a Friedman lecture. This is from actually the late 60s. And he's going to talk about a couple different ideas about freedom. And I will have to mute my microphone, otherwise you're going to get echoes.
Tonight is the role of government in a free society. And I think in discussing that subject, the first thing you have to do is to emphasize the very different meanings that free has. There are two quite different meanings of free, which tend to get confused, and which it's important to keep separate. The first is freedom in the sense of the absence of coercion. That's the sense in which I shall be trying to use the term. The second is free in the sense of free lunch, in the sense of absence of cost. The two meanings are very different, and there are few more important sources of confusion about the proper role of government in our society than the confusion between the two very different meanings of the word free. The freedom that was suggested back in the days of World War II by Franklin Roosevelt when he spoke of the four freedoms and spoke of the freedom from want. How can you guarantee one person of freedom from want except by coercing another person to provide the material means for his being free from want?
So there you have kind of economic context, historical context also, about this idea of the role of government. And it's important to remember, as we'll revisit in a minute here, that Milton Friedman was the key economic advisor to Ronald Reagan. And when he talks about these two concepts of freedom, he's talking about the freedom from coercion, of course, in the absence of cost, but in terms of the role of government, he's talking about government as a coercive force. In other words, that the government is going to take freedom away from people in order to provide it for others. And a little bit later on in the lecture, he uses a very interesting term, which says that the role of government in providing freedom from people should be at the point where people are empowered to achieve their separate objectives. What's really interesting about that is that, as we know, the conservative frame is about the whole idea of self-reliance, about self-interest. You have no accounting for others in the conservative frame. And here Friedman basically spells out this idea of freedom and government staying out of people's lives so they can achieve their separate objectives. And this raises a whole bunch of moral questions, which I hope are rattling around in your brains right now, because we'll get to them a little bit deeper as we proceed here. So the next video is Ronald Reagan. This is his famous 1964 A Time for Choosing speech. And this was actually run as a half-hour program on network television with time that was purchased by the Goldwater campaign. And this is Ronald Reagan laying out the tenets of this new conservatism that really was, I guess you could say, pioneered linguistically and theoretically by Milton Friedman. So here's Ronald Reagan segment from A Time for Choosing.
Has said at Stanford University that the Constitution is outmoded. He referred to the president as our moral teacher and our leader. And he says he is hobbled in his task by the restrictions of power imposed on him by this antiquated document. He must be freed so that he can do for us what he knows is best. And Senator Clark of Pennsylvania, another articulate spokesman, defines liberalism as meeting the material needs of the masses through the full power of centralized government. Well, I, for one, resent it when a representative of the people refers to you and me, the free men and women of this country, as the masses. This is a term we haven't applied to ourselves in America. But beyond that, the full power of centralized government, this was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose. They also
So there, Reagan even spells it right out for us. So he talks about this idea of liberals, progressives, referring to people as the masses. And this whole idea that that's so offensive because it denies individuality, freedom, and autonomy, which is the crux of Friedman's whole concept of laissez-faire economics. Then he literally says about government controlling people through force and coercion, going back to what Friedman said about government having to coerce things from people in order for other people to be free from want. And then a little bit later on in the speech, and I'll obviously with this being posted on the website, you can listen to the whole thing. He talks about how the private sector is more effective and economical. And you have to consider in the context of 1964 that this was a radical idea. We just came off of the New Deal, coming off of the Great Depression, and all the pushback against the corporate powers that were pretty much dominating economic public policy. Having the New Deal, we had 2 world wars, kind of bookending the New Deal, that were very much part of the country coming together. And then, of course, in the 50s with Eisenhower, you had all sorts of huge public projects like the interstate highway system, great expansion of public education during the 1950s. So in 1964, to come out with this idea that individual liberty and personal choice in the free market should be the foremost fundamental right that is protected, and that anything that inhibits that is force and coercion, really set the stage for the idea of the immoral public. And then this one really needs no introduction, but it's an important moment as this whole movement builds, because this is the crux of the whole thing building up, kind of the height of the crescendo, if you will.
In crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people.
So I found it interesting that he had a little bit of hesitation there when he said government of, by, and for the people. It's kind of an interesting slip there. But obviously, the idea that government is not the solution, government is the problem, it standardized these common sense ideas that we now have, that personal choice and liberty are moral. Freedom is equivalent to the choice to do something. Very typically, that means some type of profit or financial gain, because that is how success is measured in the conservative frame, largely by financial gain. And this idea that government impedes choice and freedom. And it's interesting that Reagan there also evoked this whole idea of the liberal elite, talking about the elitists in Washington knowing what's best. You know, that's a carryover from the Nixon campaign in '68. The idea of the liberal elite. So there's a huge historical precedent for this. And I want to open up the first poll here. And this is going to require you all to be perfectly honest here. So here's the poll. So just a two-choice question, yes or no. And obviously there's no wrong answer, but can you think of ways government impedes your freedom? And there's looking to make a point here. So go ahead and vote. And if you wish to specify something, you can specify something in the chat box as we move along here. So yep, it's looking like it's unanimous. And people are typing, so so Anne is. So the question is, can you think of ways government impedes your freedom? There's one person who apparently can't see the poll, but the question is already a unanimous response. Brilliant, Philip. If you read the chat box, Philip Nolan has said that government impedes his freedom because he can't crush a Republican. So if you're not looking at the chat box, that's what he said. So it was actually unanimous, and there was a point to all that, which is that that it's a very pervasive and common sense feeling that in one way or another, it's very easy to consider government as the bad guy. You know, we pay taxes, we have to go a certain speed limit, all sorts of examples, you know, and then of course even in a greater scale for many people. So coming off of your responses, just a quick examination here of how this has affected public discourse. And as you may know, Frank Luntz is a conservative pollster. He's also a conservative linguist. He is one of the primary message people for conservatives. And this is from an interview just last year, 2 years ago, 2013. That was on CBS after a poll he had conducted asking if people trust government. So let me turn up the volume there. I'll turn off the microphone.
Only 35% of Americans trust the president. That poll was taken before the government's secret surveillance program was revealed. Republican pollster Frank Luntz did the survey. He's also a CBS News political analyst. Frank, good morning.
Good morning, and nobody trusts anybody anymore.
So what's the problem?
The problem is that you're told one thing one day. They then tell you something different the next. They then change it the third day. Republicans aren't trusted, Democrats aren't trusted, Congress is at its lowest numbers in modern history. And so it's not just the president. We feel that all these institutions have let us down. We have no confidence in them. And frankly, I think that this is acidic. I think that this is a very dangerous trend in American society, because who's supposed to bring you together? Who's supposed to unite you? Who's supposed to be the people that you turn to when things go wrong, to know that eventually things will go right?
But you're saying it's more than
Okay. So isn't that interesting? Here's a conservative who is, at the very end there, says, who are you supposed to look to when things are bad to know that things are going to be getting better? Really interesting. His first statement was kind of the key for me, and I'm sure it was the key for him, otherwise he wouldn't have led with it, and the CBS anchors completely ignored it, is this idea that nobody trusts anybody anymore. And he mentions how it has an acidic effect on American society. Notice he didn't say in American politics, he said American society. And Luntz is a really smart man, and he said exactly what he means. Because consider the societal impact on all of this, on the lack of empathy and the lack of trust in our government, primarily because of the dominance of the conservative frame that he has actually helped to establish. And then he reveals a little biconceptualism there at the end, talking about how, you know, it's something that we all need. We need that support system so that when things go bad, we know that they'll get better. So fascinating impact on public discourse there. So here's an example from Mike Goucher, and Mike Goucher does a pretty decent program on Sunday mornings called Up Front, and it's carried on most Wisconsin, I think they're ABC affiliates, and it's out of Milwaukee. But Goucher here points to information from a Marquette poll, and he really starts to get at this idea that, look, this is having a real impact on how people not only think about government, but how people actually behave in and towards government. Almost forgot.
Wisconsin voters share those doubts. In a Marquette Law School poll conducted back in May, 82% of those surveyed either strongly or somewhat agreed with the statement, government is pretty much run by a few big interests looking out for themselves. 67% either strongly or somewhat agreed with the statement, you really can't trust government to do the right thing. The erosion of public confidence in our government institutions isn't a new phenomenon. It's part of a decades-long trend. The question is, what does that growing distrust mean for our nation's future? On a celebratory holiday weekend filled with fireworks, parades, and patriotic fervor, it's probably a question better left for another day. But our crisis in confidence is no small matter, a real test for a still young democracy. Thanks for being with us today.
So Goucher gets at the end that kind of a big question about what does it mean for our democracy, and as somebody who's been following politics with the media for a very long time, he's probably having a sense that, look, something's very wrong about this. And a few salient points there. First of all, most people agreeing with the statement that government is run by those who are looking out for themselves, right? There's that self-interest frame. And then you can't trust government to do the right thing. And if any of you have studied any kind of psychology, the idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy, we know that framing and unconscious thought particularly influences our behavior. So at what point does that distrust in government and government looking out for themselves become a self-fulfilling prophecy, especially if this has been happening over 40 or 50 years? So just to underline these points, that the absence of a progressive frame has created a moral vacuum in public discourse. And what happens when there's a vacuum in public discourse and knowledge is that people look to well-established frames to fill the void. And you have this very strong, powerful Friedman-Reagan vision to fill the vacuum, and one that is very easy to understand, it's very easy to believe, and it is pervasive. And one of the things that this dominance has led to, which is what we want to look at next, is it's hidden some basic truths. So the whole idea that if you tell a lie often enough and consistently enough that people will believe it, in this case, the dominance of the conservative frame has hidden some basic truths that Friedman actually denies. If you take there's a kind of a bucket list there, and part of it is that his model, his idea of government's role in society as being non-coercive relies on some things in order for it to function. First one, and the most important, is that it depends on people making rational decisions. So, yeah, and you should see the PowerPoint coming up, because I refreshed it. So, the Friedman model depends on this idea of people making rational decisions about things that affect their lives. We know that's absolutely not true. We know that people act on many different biases, social, religious, economic, classist, hierarchical, you name it. There are lots of biases. And you cannot rely on people to make utilitarian decisions that will objectively improve their lot in lives. The other thing it depends on is this idea of short-term cost-benefit analysis. And what that means is that everything is based on this idea of is the cost of this going to outweigh the benefit? And it's generally considered in terms of financial, as you see in the third point there. Right. So the idea that the only measure of success is financial, and that you make all these policy decisions based on a short-term cost-benefit analysis does, yes, exactly. Phil Nolan just said Lenin said people vote with their feet. That is very true. People vote with their feet, not with their head. And then finally, this idea that the market is needs to be a moral and rational actor as well. And we all know that in the free market, when left to its own devices, as we've seen through multiple financial meltdowns, people act upon greed and self-interest, and not in the best interest, not only of themselves, but anyone else. So those basic truths need to be spoken, and the progressive frame of government helps us do that. Which we're going to get to. Yes, so another poll, and this one, the question is not only on your screen, it's going to pop up here. So there's 4 choices. So which aspect counters Friedman's idea of a free economy? Free economy meaning government should not interfere. Here are the choices. Prosperity. Private prosperity depends on the public. The idea that democracy is all of us, acting to provide people with resources necessary to pursue people's lives. Government has a responsibility to protect and empower the people it serves, or our nation is a family and we take care of each other in our families. So feel free to vote on which you think best counters Friedman's idea of a free economy. And I will tell you, there's no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. And Philip, you're absolutely correct that markets often leave fine goods to rot. Although at the Dane County Farmers Market, they try to give a lot of it away to the food pantries. So, socialists. Okay, so we've got votes from everyone, and I'll just tell you so the majority chose the idea that private prosperity depends on the public. Good choice. Followed by, with 28%, our nation as a family, we take care of each other and our families. Good that that metaphor resonated. And then there were a smattering of votes for the other two, responsibility, protect, and empower. And the definition of democracy is all of us acting through government to provide what people need for meaningful lives. So, again, no wrong answer, but in terms of what you think is effective, something good to keep in mind. The reason I went through that exercise is that the underlying concept of framing is to make the unconscious conscious. And that is kind of what this effective language thing is. Because what we need is we need to start developing a progressive self-fulfilling prophecy. Right? If people think with empathy, they will start acting with empathy, which means they will have a more progressive vision of government. And the result that we want is a true government for the people. Right? I mean, granted, Reagan said government of by and for the people, but he meant for people to do whatever they want to make as much money as they want, because that fit his frame. He wasn't talking about, true government for the people, and the idea that thought changes behavior. So, how do we go about doing that? Well, as I had in the poll, we have to start communicating these 4 ideas of the public in every issue we talk about. Now, that doesn't mean that we get up in front of a group of people and say, I want to talk to you about public education, but first, I want you to know that the public, which is the government, is all of us acting together to provide everyone opportunity to pursue a meaningful life. Well, now let's talk about education. I mean, it's too literal. The idea is to provide context for people using effective language and context that is relatable in your area of the state to an issue. And so look, just the 4 points quickly are, again, we act together to provide opportunity to people. That's what we do. And this is a moral responsibility. And I like putting in there this metaphor that because a nation is a family. Because just as you would do for your family, we have the responsibility to protect and empower all people in our family, our nation. Because in your family, look, if you had a brother or sister that lost their job, got laid off, would you turn your back on them? Would you kick them to the curb? No. You would have them over for dinner a couple nights a week. You would watch their kids and help out with their kids if they have to go work an odd shift job or go out for an important interview or something like that. There's all sorts of examples like this. I mean, we care for our parents when they age because they cared for us when we were young. And those kinds of metaphors resonate with the metaphor of the nation as families. So I would encourage you to use them. And then, of course, the one that the most of you felt was the most effective was private prosperity depends on the public. And it's kind of this idea that we all do better when we all do better. And that for so many reasons, we have a responsibility to be our brother and sister's keeper, if you want to get biblical on them. So, I've got another quick poll, because this is more for my information than yours. And there's a list of issues there. We've got the economy, education, healthcare, the environment's health, money and politics. And I'd like to get your feelings, because we have people on this webinar that represent a number of different advocacy groups and parts of the state. So again, they're the economy, education, healthcare, the environment, women's health, and money and politics. So which one do you feel is the most important to communicate about the public? And just about all the votes are in. And no surprise, they are there's a really good distribution. And Munster votes for education. So yes, we have all the votes are in. So interesting enough, so again, the majority say the economy. Interesting because obviously that's Bernie Sanders' big issue is this idea of income inequality. And then followed by money and politics, another huge issue in a pending election cycle, followed by education and the environment and healthcare and women's health picking up some votes also. So we're going to end the vote. So what I'm trying to get at, and this is one of the hard things to really communicate to people about framing, is this idea of how framing connects issues, right? That the same message works on every issue. And I think this whole frame of government, the public, really connects all these issues. And just to go down the list here really quick, and if you want to type something in the chat box on one of these issues, feel free, so everybody can see it. But this idea of the economy, and Bernie Sanders is very much on the whole income inequality thing. And what's really interesting is that the public has a key role there, right? Because the public has a responsibility to protect and empower the people. And in what way does that apply to the economy? Well, think about greed. Think about pursuit of self-interest over the well-being of others, including yourself. Because at the end of the day, we know that, well, in the short term, greed may get you a lot of money in the short term. At the end of the day, it's highly destructive. So in terms of the economy, this whole idea of the public is paramount in terms of why the public has a role in income inequality and fixing income inequality. In terms of education, look, we all have a responsibility to the next generation, just as we do to ourselves. And Don just wrote a great point that inequities in income underlie a lot of other problems, right? And it's more directly understandable. So if we use this progressive frame of the public in terms of income inequality, we can see how, right, the wealthy have a responsibility to, as Elizabeth Warren says, pay it forward to the next generation. They've reaped way more benefits from everything that we provide through the public. So, absolutely perfect. Education, again, look, we all know that education is the foundation of a thriving democracy, because we need kids not only grow up to read and write and things, but to actually understand what's possible in life. This is what the public provides. The public provides protection and empowerment so kids can go to school in a safe environment where they can learn what's possible in life. That kind of thing. Just take a look at both Phil and Mark made great points in terms of the environment becoming the most necessary, right? Because if we don't have a planet, then all of this is a moot point. And the managing climate control appears overwhelming beyond our ability. This entrenches a futility that obstructs, denies any possible solutions. And that's really true, because even cognitive research shows that when people are confronted with a disaster, it tends to have kind of a paralyzing effect on them. So in providing a positive, progressive message about the environment is critical to spurring people to act. Okay, yeah, and I can read those for you. So Phil said, managing climate control appears overwhelming beyond our ability. This entrenches a futility that obstructs and denies any possible solutions. And then Mark Fuller says, in the long term, the environment issue becomes the most necessary. In terms of healthcare and women's health issues, again, each of those apply, and then of course money in politics absolutely applies, because if we're talking about protecting and empowering people's voice in our democratic system, then nothing is more important than that, than what we can all do for each other. So just wanted you to think about those things in terms of the public and how you can connect those. So the bottom line here is that the public, which again, all of us, in terms of how we form government, democracy, of by and for the people, it needs reinforcing badly. If any of you watched any of the GOP debate last night, and I could only stand to watch the highlight reels. Okay, I'm going to jump in here. Richard has a great point here. This is a great point. Our society's daily doses of negativism in the mass media creates a strong sense of despair. The country's in a mess. No one, especially government, seems willing or able to do something about it. And it is, yeah. And Don's point is, yes, the public is being reinforced badly by progressives, correct, and badly by conservatives, so bad on all fronts. And Richard is 100% right. There is a tremendous amount of research showing that people actually are more attracted to negative comments. In fact, negative comments get more legs in political discourse and public discourse in social media and the media in general. And this is one of the reasons why I and some other people are pushing this idea of we've got to get a positive progressive frame out there. We have to communicate a positive vision. And when we talk about government, when we talk about the public, this is exactly the underlying theme, because it not only does it need reinforcing, but it needs to start changing thought and influencing behavior. And one of the points that I would like you to take away is that empathy is a positive emotion, right? What trumps fear? Sorry, no pun intended with saying trumps fear. But what trumps fear? It's hope. Hope always trumps fear. And empathy creates hope and trust, right? If you are living in a society where there's empathy, then that means that you know that people care for you just as you care for others. And you can live a life and pursue what it is that will be meaningful for you, and know that there is a community with you just like a family, right? And that then creates trust also, because then we start trusting better. Unlike this conservative dominance, which is based in self-interest and relies on this whole idea of people making choices, and of course we know that that is disastrous. So I'm going to leave you tonight with, this is about 3 minutes. And then we're going to just do a quick little wrap-up poll. And I want to leave you with something positive. to Richard's point, I'm going to leave you with something positive. And, apologies to those of you who are really staunch Bernie Sanders supporters. Bernie is great. He embodies progressive values. He lives them, so there's no question. But in terms of communicating progressive values, nobody is as good as Elizabeth Warren. And this video is from the last government shutdown debate. It's very relevant now because we're being faced with the same circumstances. So here is your daily dose of positive progressivism and to counter the negativism, as Richard so aptly pointed out. So here's Elizabeth Warren with a positive message about what we all do for each other. Better mute myself.
Now that the House Republicans have shut down the government, holding the country hostage because of some imaginary healthcare boogeyman, Republicans almost immediately turned around and called on us to start reopening parts of our government. Why do they do this? Because the boogeyman government is like the boogeyman under the bed. It's not real. It doesn't exist. What is real, what does exist, are all those specific, important things that we as Americans have chosen to do together through our government. In our democracy, government is not some make-believe thing that has an independent will of its own. In our democracy, government is just how we describe the things that we, the people, have already decided to do together. It's not complicated. Our government has 3 basic functions: provide for the national defense, put in place rules of the road like speed limits and bank regulations that are fair and transparent, and build the things together that none of us can build alone. Roads, power grids, schools, the things that give everyone a chance to succeed. We are a nation of innovators and entrepreneurs, growing small businesses and thriving big businesses. But our people succeed, our country succeeds, because we have all come together to put public institutions and infrastructure together. We all decided to pass laws and put cops on the beat so that no one steals your purse on Main Street or your pension on Wall Street. We all decided to invest in public education so that businesses have skilled workers and a kid with an idea can create the next breakthrough company. We all decided to invest in basic science so there is a great pipeline of ideas to create our future. These achievements aren't magic. They didn't simply occur on their own or through dumb luck. In each instance, we made a choice as a people to come together. The Food and Drug Administration makes sure that the white pills that we take are antibiotics and not baking soda. The National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration oversees crash tests to make sure that all new cars have effective brakes. The Consumer Product Safety Commission makes sure that babies' car seats don't collapse in a crash and that toasters don't explode. We don't know who they are, but there is no question that there are Americans alive today, Americans who are healthier, Americans who are stronger because of these and countless other government efforts. Alive, healthier, stronger because of what we did together.
So is everybody applauding? Oh, she is. That, I think that last line should be every Democrat's campaign slogan. Alive, alive, better, stronger because of what we do together. That's just brilliant. So great framing there. So I'm going to leave you with an open-ended question, because at the end of the day, if we don't do something, then what is this for? I mean, we can watch the webinars and we can read the newspapers and think, but what are we actually going to do to change discourse about the public? And from the responses, you all work on different issues. You all are in different parts of the state. You know what's effective in your area. This is a short answer. You can respond if you'd like. I can share responses on the website when I put the archive up. Or you can just think about it yourselves, talk to your groups, talk to your organizations about how important it is for people in advocates for the environment, advocates for education, for healthcare, for women's freedom issues, that the public has an important role. And so that we start getting candidates also who start evoking that idea, instead of Democrats who run away from government or actually evoke the conservative frame that government is immoral, government is bad. So as you do that, I'm going to make a couple announcements here to wrap up, and feel free to just chime in with questions on the Q&A button if you have any. But first announcement is, so this Saturday is Fighting Bob Fest in Madison, and it's going to be at Breese Stevens Field, which is on East Washington Avenue. It's this huge open-air soccer stadium. Most of you probably know it. So they're trying something new, and at 4:30, after the whole thing is done, after Ruth Conniff gets up and says her goodbyes, there's going to be 4 people in a tent. Mike McCabe from Blue Jean Nation, and myself, and Julie Wells and Ellen Holly from the Forward Institute, my former colleagues from the Forward Institute. And we're going to have kind of an end-of-the-day discussion on, first of all, imagining a new political language, which, as you all know, Mike McCabe, this is one of his big things also. So imagining a new political language through which we can, change public discourse and spur people to action. So it's 45 minutes. So if you're going to Fighting Bob, stick around for another 45 minutes. Come and participate. I think it's going to be a really good discussion, and it'll really help get people to walk away with something that they can actually go out and start changing public discourse on. And you can't do much better than Mike and Julie and Ellen, and I'm happy to be there. So that's announcement number 1. Announcement number 2 is the schedule for the Thinking Points Journal. When I started doing the Thinking Points Journal every other week, it didn't dawn on me that, looking ahead in my calendar, that there are some weeks, such as this week, where Thinking Points Journal and the webinar coincide. And all of you are extremely busy. I think it might be a little overkill, overwhelming for all of you. So what I'm going to do is shift the schedule for the Thinking Points Journal. So the Thinking Points Journal will come out on the 2nd and 4th week of the month, and it will be more content heavy. So you'll have a good couple, 3 weeks to absorb and use what's in the Thinking Points journal, because you're going to get 2 of those a month. And again, they're going to be more content heavy instead of just kind of an every other week check-in on some issues. And then the webinar schedule will stay the same. So you'll have the second week of the month to get a Thinking Points. The third Thursday, you will have a webinar. And then the fourth week, you will get a Thinking Points journal. So, and I encourage suggestions. The one thing I can't do with the Thinking Points journal webinar is answer specific campaign questions. We can't go there. So anyway, a quick comment from Don Ferber, if you don't see it in the chat, and this is a great reminder, is that what connects people together is emotional content more than facts. Facts do not connect people. A laundry list of facts will in fact divide people, because you will have people going off on their own issues. Whereas if you talk about values, because the values evoke unconscious emotions. And one of the things that I'm going to bring up at Fighting Bob in my little segment is this idea that we've got to stop confusing our conscious feelings with unconscious emotion. Because when we evoke values through framing and progressive values, we activate unconscious emotions that actually stimulate behavior and stimulate action. And our feelings are just the conscious manifestation of that, of that unconscious emotion. So the feeling is just surface. So, and Carol, thank you. Good topic. Discuss how to keep a topic nonpartisan. My suggestion is stick to an issue. So you can still talk about issues in terms of values and framing, but the other thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to advocate for a specific party or campaign or candidate position. So that's, if you stick to issues and information, you're fine. So I'm going to, looks like about half the people have voted or made suggestions. That's great. I will share those. Somebody just snuck in there under the wire. Okay, sorry. If you have other ones emailed into me, it looks like a couple of people didn't have a chance to make some comments, but I will make sure that I put those up on the website. And you've had great ideas. Thank you for pointing out some of these great pieces of information, and keep it up. And I will see you at BobFest, or I will see you out in the state, or I will see you online or by email. So, oh, somebody's typing. I don't want to cut anybody off in case they have a big announcement. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you all. So ending session, and the recording is going to stop. Thanks.